Saturday evening and Saturday morning for US guys. We have another webinar which is brought to us by Bitma North America chapter, one of the most active chapter of our alumni association, BIT Meshra, Bitma. I'm thankful to Surinder sir, Ravi sir, and all the members of Bitma who are continuously trying to help our alma mater and bringing people from all over the world and giving the talk. These people whom they are contacting, they are definitely very, very busy in their own world, and bringing them here for all of us is not a small task. And I thanks once again to each one of you, Surinder sir and Ravi sir. Without making much time wastage here, I'll request Surinder sir to introduce Professor Bajpai to everybody. Surinder sir, over to you.
Thank you so much, Vishal. On behalf of Bitma NA, I extend a warm welcome to Professor Jitendra Bajpai, who's another BIT alumnus. Professor Bajpai is an adjunct faculty at the School of Professional Studies and Graduate School of Architecture, Planning and Preservation of the Columbia University, New York. Prior to his current position, he has served the World Bank for almost 20 years in various positions, including as the director and advisor to the East Asia and Pacific Region Vice President. In addition, he has led one of the largest IT modernization efforts undertaken by the World Bank, Operations and Knowledge Systems programs in support of the bank's internal reforms. Beside his World Bank career, Professor Bajpai has worked with several firms and institutions dealing with infrastructure and urban development issues. And as a faculty at the Indian Institute of Technology, Mumbai, and Indian School of Business. He's a member of Advisory Board of Future Urban Development for the World Bank Economic Forum, and as a consultant recently served the Brookings Institution, Washington, D.C., the Rwanda and Uganda government under the sponsorship of International Growth Center UK and the CEF and the Development Bank of Latin America. The topic of today's talk is next generation of infrastructure. And we all know how important is infrastructure for the growth of the countries. Without further ado, here is Professor Bajpai.
Thank you, Surinder. My introduction was very long, but I'm somebody who is very pleased to see that I have to contribute a little bit to BIT, my foundational education where I got. And that I picked up this topic because I thought that India needs a lot of infrastructure in the future. And therefore it is truly something which will be required for the development of the country. So let me, what I will do is I'll straight jump into my slides, and we can open up for discussion later on. I will not give you a solution, but I will make you think about it, because the question is how you are viewing the infrastructure for the future in a country like India or any other country across the world. So let me share my screen. And okay, and then where I go here. No.
Yes, sir.
I hope
it is
very good. Great. Thank you. Thank you. So let me start here. Infrastructure needs. I think infrastructure services are essential if you want to improve the productivity of workers and well-being of a society. And the question is, the demand for infrastructure is enormous, particularly in developing world where the new infrastructure will be built. At the same time, including in developed world like United States and other places, Europe and all, where there's a need for preparing their infrastructure for the emerging needs. And there, once again, the focus is on retrofitting and adapting to new technologies and new emerging lifestyles of people with the new development. So what is really influencing the infrastructure needs and what are the mega trends which are affecting it is very essential to understand, because infrastructure is a long-term investment and usually a capital intensive investment. And therefore it's important to know what are the mega trends which will be shaping it. So I tried to identify 5 mega trends. So clearly, if you look at our human history, you will always find rise and fall of our societies and linked to most of these factors in the past as well. I mean, there has been movement of people to cities, and there have been natural disasters, failure of states because of pandemics and war. The emergence of technologies made people to move around the globe and improve trade, and so on and so forth. But the world, the same trend is now very different in current situation. And it's surprising that last 2 years, unfortunately, we have witnessed the impact of all of these 5, 6 factors. We are right now more than half of our world population in cities and is growing very fast in developing world. We had COVID, which disrupted all the relations we can think of, whether social or economic. And now we are facing war, which is affecting the inflation and the livelihood of people. So, and climate change issues are with us. Severity of that we are seeing across the countries. At the same time, we have also noticing the cyber world, which is changing our lifestyle, but also making us extremely vulnerable. So we are in the midst of all this and witnessing already. So what do you do? What could be the future for all this? And that is the problem. The problem is that most of the issues we are now confronting is extremely complex. They are complex in the nature, and the solutions are very difficult because the relationship of these different factors are what kind of uncertainty they create and risk they pose is very difficult to ascertain. So in this kind of environment, how infrastructure, which is a long-term investment, will be built is really a question, that how we can sustain infrastructure for the future by minimizing the risk and adapting to the changes which we are going to see in the future. So the relationships are so non-linear of these factors that there is always a tipping point, and we do not know how that tipping point will change. It's not a linear projection you can make of many of the factors. So that's a complex world we are in. So the question is what we have to do to think about our new phase of infrastructure. So the emerging trend, if you look at the past, as an engineer when I was kind of trained in the BIT and all that, we learned we were very much in the process of designing infrastructure as an independent entity, single purpose infrastructure, whether it's a road or water supply or any kind of major facility. And it was one flow of infrastructure, a one-way flow of seeing it in a very siloed manner. What is happening is now the trend to address these 5 factors which I talked about. People are looking for designing infrastructure which are multi-purpose, which are low carbon, which are tied to natural system. They're integrated with what are the social contexts you are, which could be very varied across countries, and how you adopt to this, the climate thing, which is becoming extremely severe and unpredictable. So how we move to this new paradigm is a question. And that's where people are looking for some solutions under each specific context they are dealing with. The problem is that given the diversity of infrastructure and conditions, it's very difficult to say exactly what solution would be, because one has to find those solutions within its own means. But there could be certain guiding principles, which I thought is more important and which I have learned and observed through the different kind of projects I have seen. And what I see is that there is, if we can embrace some of the guiding principles that will shape our thinking for finding solutions. So which are those guiding principles? So here I try to list 5 of the guiding principles. That we must start thinking about co-locating infrastructure. We should think about how we can make it interdependent and coupled with others, how we can make it conserving low emission and adaptive, resilient. At the same time, given the new technologies are coming, how to make it smart and shared. Now, these are broad principles, what it means and how you define it. For that, what I did is I took some of the basically simple illustration of a real world project to illustrate that how they have tried this. So let's look at co-located, what I mean by that. And there could be so many examples under each of them. But here is I take 2 examples. One is utility doors. This is very common that people are putting now one kind of corridor under the major infrastructure for all the utilities. Now it could be private sector maybe develop this thing, or it could be government. And you will find these kind of corridors very well done in Singapore and other places. At the same time, given the high density in cities and all, Japan and many other places, people are putting even the electrical substations, major transformers under the buildings. And they have done with some sort of insulations and other means so that it doesn't create noise or anything. And there is no such thing as a separate transformers hanging in the urban scene. So this is a very interesting way to think about that, how you can co-locate multi-use facilities. The second similar solution could be bridge. If you are talking about bridge, this is an example of bridge in Amsterdam, where there is a tram line, the traffic, sidewalks, bikeways, pipelines, water sewerage, and all the utilities all are used on the same bridge. Now, we do not have to build bridge for each of those things, like a railway bridge and highway bridge and so on and so forth. But here is some solution is a cross-silo solution. Now here, this is a very interesting example. And the way to illustrate for me is to really play a small video. So let's see if I can get this for you.
I'm Christoph Stieler. I'm working as project manager for Bajpai in the tunneling business.
Yes.
Sir, the video
now
is,
working here in the London area here in the ICE 200 exhibition.
Wait a minute. Can I hear? Yeah.
Sir, YouTube the video link is not shared with us. I think you have not shared the complete screen.
Can you see now?
No, sir. Only your PPT is being visible to us.
Okay. So let me go back. So what I should do?
Sir, share.
Okay, I will do that. Share.
And complete screen. Including the sound. Include computer sound and share the screen, not the window. The way we did in the start.
Share content.
Share screen.
Where it is showing share screen. Where does it show share screen?
You have on the top there is a share. Then include computer sound.
I did that.
And then screen. Just
presenter
before Windows.
Before Windows. Add background? No.
No, below this is something called a screen.
Yes.
Screen. Yeah, please select the screen.
I selected.
Yeah, it is okay now. Yeah, sir.
We are talking about how to make cities and nations smarter. The SMART project is a dual purpose project in Kuala Lumpur, in the capital of Malaysia. SMART stands for stormwater, management and traffic tunnel. There are two major problems at Kuala Lumpur. On the one hand, there are every year during the monsoon season heavy rainfalls and heavy floods, which cause an overflow of the two rivers, River Klang and River Gambok. And that causes well, a lot of problems. On the other hand, one of the main roads from the south into the city is heavily congested by public traffic. This causes a lot of frustration to people driving that road into the city, and therefore the smart tunnel was developed in order to alleviate both problems. The idea was to build a tunnel for both purposes. As a monsoon is on a regular annual basis, repeating every year at a certain time in the year, and during the other time of the year, the tunnel wouldn't be used for any water deviation, so it could be used for a different purpose, and that was the idea. To have a combined tunnel system for traffic as well as for the flood deviation. The tunnel is divided into three sections. There's the lower section, which could be used in these if there's only a little rainfall. Then they have two road decks, and only in the event of heavy rainfalls and high floods, the middle tunnel section or section of the tunnel will be closed for traffic, and the whole tunnel could be used for the water deviation. Once the flood event is over, the tunnel gets cleaned, and at least after 48 hours it could be reopened for public traffic.
So now I come back to my share. Now I go back to my screen.
Sir, you have stopped sharing. You will have to share it once again.
Share.
Yeah, go to share once again.
Yeah.
And then again screen and open the PPT. You do not need to close it again.
Okay.
Because you are sharing the entire screen. So whatever you will be looking at the screen will be visible to us.
Okay, fine. Yeah, got it. Can you see?
No, sir, not yet. Sharing.
Mm-hmm. See, this is my problem comes when I.
Sorry, sir, for the first time, actually, I understand Teams is not very user friendly. Share.
Yeah.
Sir, with the share option.
Yeah, it is share.
Then include the computer sound to be on safer side.
Yeah.
And then click the screen.
Yeah. PowerPoint's live.
Sir, you have not yet shared the screen with us. Yeah, it is.
Now
okay.
I got.
Yeah, sir. Again, yes. Make it full, sir. Yeah.
Yeah. So we saw the co-located one, and now we'll go to coupled and interdependent. And here I took some examples of Croton water filtration plant in New York City, which you know that the water from New York comes from a watershed in different places, and they were building this facility right in the neighborhood of Bronx, which is a well-developed area, and people were opposing for bringing a water filtration plant. But during the Bloomberg administration, they somehow managed to say that we will build a facility which will also have amenities for the car. So here is about 100 feet below the ground. They had a facility on top of it. They built the golf course and parks. It has a very lot of features about filtering the water. There's a wetland for cleaning the water, which is stormwater, at the same time storage of stormwater so that they can recycle it to use for the golf course and other things. So it was extremely well, and you can see the top of this whole roof, they had a polystyrene kind of a feature which was making the different shapes. At the same time, the top layer of soil was 8 or 10 inches or so forth. So that idea was to bring a entire facility in a neighborhood with providing the amenities. The same thing they tried in a similar way for a major park in Toronto, where Sherbourne Common, where they created, again, the stormwater storage and filtration plant under the park, which used to use UV rays and water is to come. And these towers were showing the cascade of water flow and all, the aeration unit, and then the biofilters were there to clean up the water before the stormwater flows to the lake in the Toronto. And it became a major recreational facility as well. The second, other couple of examples could be very linear in that, like highways were putting, this is very common now in many countries, to put solar barriers as a sound barriers. This is in Singapore, and I believe in India and Gujarat also people have tried this. This is a huge 45 hectare of solar on top of, one of the reservoir and lake in Singapore. And so you can have a power generation at the same time. You are reducing the evaporation of water, and at the same time, you are inhibiting any kind of algae and other growth in the water as well. So it has a multi-purpose. At the same time, it is brings the low emission technology to play. Then you can have a coupled infrastructure which is interdependent at the same time. It is a low emission, like a green infrastructure we're talking about. But here, what I'm trying to show is a very major facility in San Francisco, which was 11 different transit systems have been brought together. And it is at a site which was a terminal before, almost 70 years old, which has been converted into multi-use facility. And it has reduced a lot of carbon emission because the access has improved overall in terms of travel and other things. At the same time, there have been parks created and a lot of real estate development. So this is a combination of all the transport system, real estate, recreational facility, and retail and commercial development as well. This was the old one, which was in Boston tried, and now it is everybody's talking about. But those days, I remember the interesting part was that all these cars not only getting charged from solar, because most of the cars usually are parked 80% of the time. And so naturally they get charged at the same time they store the battery, which could be used in peak hour by the network grid. So these are some of the other ones. Could be even like aquaculture people are thinking about as a way to use and the so-called windmills and offshore mills. People are talking about sucking carbon dioxide from the air. This is in Colombia, somebody working on it, and they're trying to see that how the carbon capture could be put under the basalt in the New Jersey area, actually. Surinder might know it, to store at the bottom of the ocean where carbon converts into basalt for solid minerals and other things. So you can see every infrastructure has some kind of a multiple role to play. Here, this is a classical role. We know it, that if you create more permeable space in the cities, it not only purifies the water, it also increases the groundwater storage. At the same time, water could be used for filtration, and so that all the impurities which are collected during a storm is reduced before it is released in the natural rivers or the lakes and all. Multi-story buildings are doing different ways of rainwater harvesting for their consumption or for the irrigational purposes. In Rotterdam, you have a major museum, and it has thousands of vehicles which could be parked under it, but it has also a storage of stormwater because as all of us know that Holland is under the sea level, 1/3 of the country is anytime could be flooded with water and rainfall. And therefore, they have to think about all kinds of hydro features. And one of them is storage of stormwater before it is released. So this is another way of looking at that, how you can deal with storage in the museum at the same time, parking all three facilities. Now, third options I talked about principle was conserving and low emission. And this is a Hammarby in Sweden, which was at one time considered to be Olympic site, but is actually later on built as just because the Olympic didn't come, so they converted into a multi-use facility, and they tried to make sure that it has a 50% less environmental impact. It was a community of 25,000 people, and it was a very interesting experiment about how to conserve the energy used within the entire urban system. So basically, what you see here is all the inputs were coming from energy were coming from solar and other things. At the same time, there were CHP, the power plant was there using the agro waste at the same time, and all the energy coming when they were producing biogas for some transportation facility. At the same time, they were using it. All the waste was going back to composting and the agro industry and all. So they tried to create an entire ecosystem in such a way that there is no waste of energy. Even the solid waste, which was collected through vacuum tubes in the city, was all used for the incineration or CHP plants and all that. And it's a very interesting story about the whole history of it, but I don't want to go into detail. If you want, you can always look at it, and there's a nice video about it as well. So this is a urban environment, how you try to bring together all the different interactive features for conserving the energy. On the habitat side, naturally, biodiversity and habitat issues are very important. That's not only it creates our food system and soil system at the same time. I mean, every insects, every animal which is in this ecology has a function, which is, so therefore we have to preserve. But there are cases where infrastructure disrupts this, and one should avoid it. But if it's unavoidable, at least people have to understand that how to keep the integrity of the landscape and make sure the connections are maintained for the natural habitat and the movement of animals and all. So this is an example of actually Nagpur-Jabalpur highway, and it went through a lot of controversy, but in the end, city decided to, your national road folks decided to build it elevated at a section so that the tigers and all animals could migrate at the same time, seek for food and all. So this was a good example. Even the small things like people are looking at, even for turtles and all, how they could their passage and their habitat cannot be disturbed. So this is another area of how you make sure that the infrastructure and conservation is twinned together or is complementary rather than disrupting. The other example I can see is very well that people have to think about restoring the environmental value and living quality. And this is the example of Soul City. In those days, I used to work in Soul City, and the car industry was booming in the country, and highway building was very common to support the thing. They used, just because density and land as a big constraint, highways were built on top of many canals and water bodies, and exactly over time, the entire value system changed, and they demolished the whole thing and converted into a very pleasant, I will call green space, and tourism, and at the same time, they created a transit as an option and more pedestrian facilities and all that. So you can see the same spot, these pictures, and this was a major shift in the mindset of people, that how they want to build infrastructure which conserves the livability and the environmental quality of which they want to live. The other thing is now people are getting smart, so they are trying to bring conservation more smart way. And this is a classical example of New York City, where there was a railway line, and this railway line used to bring meat and milk and everything to downtown Manhattan. The rail line was abandoned, and it was in 1930s or something, and people were wanted to get rid of it, but the local, people and institutions tried to preserve it, and along with the city, they converted into a truly a linear park, which is called New York High Line. This park has transformed not only the real estate and all development around it, but at the same time, High Line is one of the most popular site for tourism, and it attracts almost like 8 million visitors in a year. So it's really transformed what you call the urban environment. At the same time, the local revenue sources through real estate and that thing. So this is a redevelopment which was very successful and considered to be an attractive feature of Manhattan now. The other areas where the circular economy concept, because people are worrying about resource constraints and how to preserve it. This is just a diagram I picked up for the construction of because in most of the city, destruction and construction, this is a regular feature, and most of the states and cities are now making sure that the choice of material and other things are such that it could be recycled or reused. And this is just tells you a approach where how you can create a circular economy in the construction sector. The fourth point is how to make infrastructure adaptive and resilient, particularly with the climate change issues. And here I take example again of Holland, which is under sea. And I would say that they are one of the, being a country which is below sea level in a very large portion of it, almost 1/3. They have learned how to live with it and how to adapt and how to build different kinds of hydraulic solutions. And I used to use their expertise in some of the projects in the World Bank. And here is an example of floating platforms. At the same time, they have also the children parks and all, which are serving as again, the stormwater storage facility during the heavy rains and all. So they are seeing how to bring the strength of partnership and innovation from not only private sector, government, and the academic institution to design these kind of facilities. Even in Atlanta, in a low-income area where there was really the problem of flooding during heavy rains and other things, they converted that as how to absorb 10 million gallons of stormwater storage below this recreational facility, which is used for the community. And it is like it not only avoids the flooding, but also provides a good livability of this low-income area. And here is an example of, again, I take Manhattan, where you know that it goes through, it has a problem of flooding or storms it encounters. And so there are several options under consideration. One of them is Big U. And if you want, I can show you this slide. So again, people have to help me. I stop share. Share. Sound. And then people have to go to People is there? No.
Yeah.
Wait a
So
minute.
you want to go to website or PPT? Yeah, it is PPT now.
PPT. So what? Oh, sorry. I'm messed up. Yeah.
So, so the whole idea is whatever screen you want to share. So you don't, you have stopped sharing again.
Yeah, I will share now. I put sound and then I go window.
No, screen. Go to
Screen.
screen.
Yeah, I
Yes.
get into screen.
Now,
And
what?
then
Yeah.
big U. Got it.
In 2012, Hurricane Sandy struck the east coast of the United States. In New York, 53 people died, while thousands were left homeless from fires and flooding. Roads and subways were underwater. Lower Manhattan was hit the hardest, and the New York City Council took action to prevent future flooding.
It was derived out of the Rebuild by Design competition following Hurricane Sandy, sponsored by HUD and the Rockefeller Foundation. So they asked 10 teams to come up with ideas to protect not just Lower Manhattan, but actually the whole East Coast.
The Architect Ingalls group, along with other design collaborators, came up with a concept called the Big U, which was one of the winning design schemes.
Rather than just put a fortification around the entire Lower Manhattan, we felt very strongly that it needed to serve the people who are living there and the people who work there. So our design wove these two ideas together into what we think will be a beautiful and habitable landscape that happens to be really pragmatic too.
I think what's really inspirational about our idea and in our design is that we utilize flood protection as a means of social infrastructure. So effectively, the park is providing flood protection for the communities along Lower Manhattan. The main client is the city of New York, so we work across various community groups. Over 100,000 residents are involved through different community organizations, and we work with them to effectively communicate the design.
The scale of the project is huge. It's one of the largest projects that the city has done in probably 50 years. During the Big U process, a lot of community groups were involved in workshops, so the design team would take multiple proposals to them, kind of play with different models or drawings and get a ton of feedback, trying to integrate ideas, mediate between the different client groups, if you will, the public and the city, and then communicate visually.
In my experience in the past, I've seen how Lumion has been used to communicate design ideas to the public, and as a growing trend with representation of design comes animations, and I think it was the perfect software for representing the animation capabilities of the project.
For people who aren't used to seeing these images, something like a huge model or an animation that really shows the entire project in one take or one swoop is super helpful. So to be able to visualize it all at once in one continuous animation, we thought would be a very valuable add. It was pretty amazing to see kids pointing and looking at the video and being able to understand the entire thing much better, and people really being able to kind of look at the animation and talk to us and feel like they understood a lot better what's coming for them. Even where we have to have flood wall and floodgates, there's intense design attention that's paid to that so that it becomes a nice urban experience and not just necessary infrastructure.
I think being able to communicate the different storm scenarios was really helpful, because in the past we've always shown kind of beautiful sunny day renderings that were pretty static alongside a rainy day rendering, and you never saw how the park can actually perform. So using the different kind of weather sequences in an animation, for example, was pretty helpful for us.
We'd like to show the park in all of its seasonal conditions and all of its weather conditions. We were able to do a small series of flood scenarios for concentrated moments. I think it would be valuable to show the overall park experiencing something like that.
I saw people genuinely excited about the different kind of floodgates being deployed and seeing the water rise. And I think the length of the animation, because the park is so huge, people really got to understand the scale and the nature of this project. So I think it was kind of like an awe-inspiring moment for a lot of people when the animation was finished.
You know, parents would be pointing to kids, oh, that's where we ride bikes. It's going to be like that in the future. We're going to be able to ride bikes, you know, along the river again. That's what we do, kind of recognize themselves in the project.
I think being able to use a video clip or an animation to show the design, not only just the design, but the scale of the project in any project in the future is really important. So the ease of being able to share our information and communicate it across the city, across the US, and across the world is really helpful,
I think.
So I think that was a nice way to.
Sir, just click the presentation. Open the PPT. Yes, that one, sir. Yeah.
Yeah. So now again, I have to go back. Let me quickly. We were here. So you just saw that how in a high density, extremely complex environment like Manhattan, you're trying to address the issue of resiliency at the same time, providing amenities for the city and making the city more adaptive to future storms. Next, fifth principle, smart and share, is we all are experiencing in our day-to-day life as we can see it. That the whole purpose of these solutions is to use the asset more effectively. So excess capacity, which is like a sharing, you have a car and you can sharing with more people, or you are even freight movements. You might be sharing about freight vehicles with multiple suppliers and consumers and all that. So that's excess capacity is shared with others. Connecting people, which is we live with Uber and Lyft and other Ola and other systems already. So how you connect and collaborate and build peer groups. And then platforms, the IT platforms, which are where the data of all kinds of city functions or government are shared with private sector. And on that, people can do a lot of further developments in terms of any kind of applications one can work from the private sector side or in terms of communities, and NGOs can develop it as well. So sharing is not only just for IT platform, but also how we share the spaces. So this is a Times Square of New York City in 2005. And you can see left side, this is one of the most busy and part of the city, I would say. Almost like 360,000 people enter in this area. And how this was given the space to vehicles, now people realize this is the space should be for people, and therefore they convert it into completely people's space in some part of it. So this is a kind of, again, a change in perception that we need a space for not vehicles only, but also for people. And this question is at appropriate conditions, we should try to improve the livability by doing that. Yes, cars, when you talk about mobility, Mr. Ford and others developed a car, and the whole purpose of when the car came was, and after that, car has remained car till today. The only thing as over time was it had become faster and safer and cleaner. And now we are getting into a phase where we are trying to see how can it run without a driver, automation, how it is decarbonized completely, that it doesn't use any kind of fuel sources, which creates carbon emissions, and how it could be made shared with others. And so shared example, we had done that before. Autonomous vehicles, the so-called AVs, are incoming, and actually you'll be surprised to hear that 136 cities in the world are already piloting and testing it. It comes to electric vehicle. It is the future. It's the extremely 50% increase over the last couple of years. not only just Europe and the US, but China has taken a lot of lead in this. And so the e-mobility is going to be the future. And e-mobility really brings out how interdependent we have to be across many sectors, whether it's a different kind of travel pattern you have to deal with. We have to connect with electric power system, the grid issues, the real estate and other and local government too, in terms of charging stations, power. So what you're seeing is a cross-sectoral, institutional work has to be done to really build an ecosystem for e-mobility. The cities will undergo, and the road systems and other things, the entire urban landscape, we will be changing in the future. Car-dependent city, which you see on the left side, with a lot of parking spaces are given, is going to be, in the future, there will be less and less car ownership once the sharing and other things pick up and new mobility comes. What you'll see is that road spaces will be given more to other uses, whether it's for public transport, a bicycle, and other thing. But besides that, sidewalks might get wider, or there will be a lot of curb management will be done to for the pickup and drop off of not only freight, but also automated vehicles and things like that. So the entire urban landscape and the space use will change from where we are now to the future. And here are some of the new modes which are becoming, the rent and share kind of facilities of scooters and passenger cars and buses. And I think this is evolving now in certain parts of the city in many places. And countries like United States, where parking space is enormously used in urban space, will undergo transformation for other uses, not just parks, but also other, activities and even offices and other uses will come up. The next part is this real-time information system and how people are reacting. This is the IT-based system we are talking about. And this will affect the behavior of people in terms of how they consume the infrastructure services, whether it is electricity or power or gas or anything you can think of, because once you know how much it costs at different time of the day, depending on demand, you are trying to modulate your consumption pattern. So you will not like to wash your clothes when peak hour rates of the electricity is high, and you'll try to do it in the evening. And same thing may be true for tomorrow for charging your vehicles and other things, which are electric vehicles. And all. So this is going to turn not only mobility part, but also many other services. For instance, people are talking about smart water, where you are going to create sensors at different elements of the water system, and there will be a two-way real-time information collection through IT and sensors, which will monitor how much water is getting consumed, how much supply is available, how reliability of quantity and quality. You can ration it if you want. How much will be discharged during the various climate variability conditions, and accordingly you can manage that. At the same time, you can apply a differential pricing system for managing the consumption as well as discharge. So you can see that the entire sensor-based IT infrastructure is going to become very important in major services. Here is Singapore is one example I took, where the entire now with the capability of 3D modeling, you don't have to wait for city maps, which are done once every 10 years. But here you can get it every couple of years, very quickly, and you can see how city is evolving, and you can get into three-dimensional details to extend, like you can see that small part which I have enlarged it, and it has a entire data collection which has been done into almost like 100 terabytes of data they have collected to build this. But this tells you exactly how city is evolving over time. So you can monitor the land development patterns. You can monitor where is the solar potential for solar energy and installation of solar panels, how the wind flows will affect, how the heat island effects are in the city where we have to deal with mitigation measures, and so on and so forth. So its entire sustainability management product for a city could be could utilize this kind of technology and monitoring features, which could be updated every couple of years. So what I was trying to say, how these principles could be inculcated in our practices, and that means a major change in terms of our culture and way of thinking. So what usually inhibits this kind of a change? So one is clearly inertia. I mean, people like to not change what they have been doing in the past. So they don't want to take risk about it. So other part is the lack of knowledge on part of the government agents and the risk and gains and technologies that affect the government agencies. So there is always they try to kind of, either they're not aware of it or they will try to kind of not take a risk to do something different. Institutional culture, that's what I wanted to say, that we become very quickly a very department silos and sector silos, institutional silos, where solution requires now more and more multidisciplinary interventions. It is, as you saw all the examples I showed you, you cannot be in one discipline, but rather you have to see how other disciplines will come into play. You may not be expert of it, but you have to bring the knowledge and the inputs from them. The partnership is evolving a lot, and it is not just one institution and agency, but people are now connecting with civil society, international organization to leverage skill and knowledge. Investors, economy, academics, very important. The risk, no doubt, could be political risk, policies and regulations, could be technological risk. There could be commercial risk as well, because these sometimes there's a high upfront cost is there, even though the investment might have a good payback over a short period of time. But this kind of commitment has to be made by investors, and they want to make sure that the risk is managed. So how we embrace it, how we'll make sure that the next generation thinking will be brought to bear with our institutional framework. And the key, what I try to stress is that integration is a fundamental, and how you anticipate change in technology, climate, and society is extremely important for doing any infrastructure. And the triple crown principle, which we talk about, sustainability, that is growth, social cohesion, and the environmental protection, these three dimensions will be critical. And to address them, we have to think about the affordability also, because social affordability of people. And adaptation is very important because of uncertainties. And there the question comes how to program and finance through collaboration, through innovation, through partnering with society and engaging public and raising the awareness about it. Innovation side, we have to think about bringing the new skill sets, new culture, the new technologies and other. And then we have to evaluate and prioritize based on life cycle assessment process, because that's the one way to look at, because some of the investments are high upfront, but they save money over time, and therefore life cycle assessment helps to make a good prioritize your actions and processes. The second part, a little what role people have to play, and clearly government must lead in nurturing this agenda of circular economy and how to leverage new knowledge and technology. They have to build public-private stakeholders and create a new generation of workforce, and that means role of academic institutions and a lot of other secondary education has to change. We have to think about rating our projects. The one example is for sustainability assessment of projects, the Envision, which was developed, but there are now different countries that have different ways of rating system depending on their choices. But the idea behind that is that we do right projects and do the project right. And this is a very critical way of thinking, is that what is right to do based on all the conditions, and then how to do it also in the right way. And that's where the question of comes is a different kind of negative and positive impact of the project one has to look at. And the another point is that by lowering the risk of any project and enhancing sustainability, you will attract the capital and investments, because investors will look for whether it's donors or whether it's the multinational banks or multilateral banks. They will look at a project if the conditions are right and the risks are lower, and that's when they will bring their capital. So this becomes very important, that how you design and develop a project which has all the risks we talk about, whether environmental or political or regulatory and all other factors, fiscal. And this becomes very important for any financing of the project. The other thing is just because once we raise the issue of uncertainty, you must have some sort of a feedback mechanism through monitoring and information sharing. And always opportunities should be built into the process that one can do the mid-course corrections with the public support. And that is something, a principle of adaptive planning process. So yeah, this is a quote I see, that if you always do what you always did, you will always get what you always get. I mean, God. And so the process should be that we should think differently and adopt to a learning culture in our institutions, whether in every part of our society. We have to come to a adaptive and learning system so that this is a picture I gave here, showing you here is again New York flooding of the tunnels, and somebody came with the idea of this balloon, which sensor, when it tells you the water and the storm water is going to increase, automatically the balloon kind of blocks the tunnel for getting flooded, to get flooded. So this is just to illustrate that there are so many solutions for things, and we should be open-minded about them. So I'll stop here, and if you have any question, then we can get back to it.
Any questions, audience? If there is any question, you can raise your hands or you can put it in the chat box. Yes, Surinder sir. Sir, you are on mute. Surinder sir, you are mute.
Now, I think this is an excellent presentation in terms of what is the future of infrastructure and how the government agencies are doing it. I was wondering what kind of individual, this is all societal impacts, whereas projects, whether they're taken by the government, but they're all public sector projects. Is there anything individuals can do that? And that this is what, how can I help it to be part of the modern infrastructure, the future infrastructure?
So yeah, if you are working for a consulting firm, or you're working for a design firm, you are an academic institution, or you are part of NGOs, you can influence. You can. That's the whole idea.
No, but how as an individual? I mean, I understand that's all professionally, but is there any individual who's not into any of these professions or is in a consulting environment? How can I do something to be?
Yeah, that's where the whole idea of public consultation process is there, where one should be very active. I mean, that's what is the people-oriented planning is. So, yeah, I think answer will be that at your own level, at community member, participate in these kind of public consultation processes and shape it through media, communication, and other means as well.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Anybody else? Any question? I think, sir, there is no question because the presentation was crisp and clear. Everything was visible by everybody, and I understand the importance of infrastructure. And really, the people are in US, but we at India definitely feels to have certain logics and certain things beyond what we are doing right now. If you, I think you people have not come to Ranchi. Ranchi is still the same what it used to be earlier. The Katatoli bridge was supposed to be built. The last government could not be completed and it is still incomplete. So means we at Jharkhand at least feels the importance of a good infrastructure planning.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yes. I mean, India has, to be very frank, someone was telling me that they have just met 20% of infrastructure needs so far. So they have developed a lot of things, and almost like 60-70% is still pending. So there is a big asset gap, right? Now the question is, so the progress had made some in the past year. I just give you an example. When I was in 1974, we did the planning, started planning for subway system in Delhi, and today it is a big system. It started after 20 years, 25 years after our studies were done. But things have happened now, and it's a building thing. The question for me, what is important is that any developing country has to find solution within its own means and within its own resources, for sure. But it has to be, you have to open up this culture of thinking that why do something very traditional way, but rather than thinking about multi-assumption, less ownership, but having multiple impact. The impact should be high, and adopting to a leapfrogging in some of the areas of technological changes as well. So there are opportunities to do that, and I think it is going to happen over time. But that's where the role of institutions and all, it becomes very important. How government tries to work through across and the cities will become, like you're saying, Ranchi has not changed. Actually, I was there 5-6 years back, and I was shocked. You were right. I mean, it's a total congested and very different than what it used to be. Yeah. Going to Faralal Chowk and then going to all the main roads and all, it's all changed now with a lot of congestion. So it is the gap of lack of planning, institutional weaknesses, fiscal constraints, and there are macro issues which are beyond the control of a city because the power is always the state level and the things like that. The local governments are very weak and all, and skill sets are very weak and very poor institutions are there. So there is a lot of gaps in terms of not just the physical infrastructure and the fiscal issues, but also institution building and skill and other things. And I think there is a need for institutions like BIT and others to really play a very critical role in the state level to start influencing that.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you.
Yes, Surinder, sir.
No, thank you very much, I said thank you.
Yeah, pleasure. It's always been a pleasure, and I wish you all very well. Thank you very much for inviting me.
So if there is no question, I would like to propose the vote of thanks. My sincere thanks to Professor Jitendra Bajpai. Sir, it was indeed a great talk, and in future also we will be like to associate with you in whatever possible manner you can spare your time. As Surinder sir already mentioned, that we have a very good plan, with very good program initiated by Bitma North America about mentoring program. So if it is possible, Surinder sir will take forward with you, and I would love it if it can be extended from your side also. My sincere thanks to Bitma North America as usual. Sir, the words are not enough with me that I can praise you all, because you people are doing a wonderful job for our alma mater. And I'm sure that these steps of yours will be taken to a very larger extent. It will help our institute to reach to the next altitude. My sincere thanks to everybody present over here, and I'll be passing on this video which we have recorded to all others who have not attended, with the hope that they listen to the talk and they get the insightful about the topic. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor
Thank
Shah.
you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
again, Professor Bajpai. Thank
Thanks, Surinder. Yeah.
you. Thank you. You're all good.